As many of you know, I am building an off-grid cabin in the back corner of my property, and I promised that it would be self-sufficient as far as having its own solar system, inverter, battery, and its own climate control with a mini split. Well, in this video, we're going to evaluate this 6,000 watt inverter, which I've chosen as the inverter that I'll use in the off-grid cabin. I think it's a really good fit given the specifications for this unit, but we're going to test it in this video, and we're going to make sure that it holds up to the specifications printed right here in the manual. So here we go. Hi everyone, I'm David. Welcome to my channel. I'm currently in the middle of building an off-grid cabin in the far back corner of my property. And I promised that it would be self-sufficient. It would have its own solar, inverter, battery. It's also going to have its own mini split for heating and cooling. I just want it self-contained as an off-grid cabin. I think this inverter, which is the EG4 6000XP, will be a very good fit for this. It's supposed to be able to support 6,000 watts continuous, and we're going to test that. Now in this video, we're testing this inverter to its specifications because unfortunately I have had some inverters on this channel before that don't meet their own specifications. The reason why I test to the manual is because we need to make sure we're getting our money's worth. If we're paying for a 6,000 watt inverter, we want to make sure that it can do 6,000 watts. Otherwise, we're throwing money away. It even comes with a Wi-Fi dongle. If you like hooking it up to Wi-Fi, I'm not personally a computer Wi-Fi kind of guy. I like just things working straight out of the box. So we're going to test it straight out of the box, hook it up to 48 volts, and start hooking up the loads. Now specifically, what I want to test in this video is going to be 6,000 watts continuous rating. I'd like to test the 3,000 watt imbalance line to neutral. That's on a 120 volt leg. And then its surge capacity. It says that it can do 12 kilowatts for 3.5 seconds. This is our battery positive, battery negative hookup, with the positive side being a circuit breaker. And then we have our load grid generator, PV input over here. We have our neutral bar and our ground bar. Then over here we have a bunch of accessories. So this is battery communication, if you can do closed loop communication from here. And the inverter does come with a couple of Ethernet cables so that you can hook that up. Some of these can be used for paralleling multiple inverters together. Then a couple of cool accessory ports for dry contact generator. I've got the test rig wired up. So we've got our nice big inverter. I've got some 4-aught wires here leading from my big house battery bank, which is currently at 100% state of charge. So that's like 100 kilowatt hours feeding into this. And then over here on the load side, we've got an old Army load bank. This is something I used to use when I was in for load testing generators. So I've currently got it wired up on the 120 volt side, the low voltage side. So let's try turning on this inverter for the first time. I think there's a switch over here on the side. It's been a few minutes because I've been reading through the manual and changing a couple of settings on the display. It comes default wanting to see closed loop communication with a lithium battery. So for the purposes of just testing the output capacity, I don't have the Ethernet cable connected, so I changed the setting to lead acid instead of lithium. And it's currently on, and we've got 120 and 240 volts here at the circuit breaker. So let's turn it on and start powering our load. Okay, so you heard the fans kick on the heater here. 2.2 amps. So let's start turning on some loads. So as we crank this, as I crank that, we're gonna see a higher and higher load over here. This should go up to 25 amps. So I'm gonna keep turning that. Good. 24.9. Excellent. So that's perfect. Let's check our display. Here we go. So it says 2.91 kilowatts. This is showing 24.8. Good. So we're not over that 3 kilowatt limit. Now, as the heaters heat up inside there, this is coming down a little bit. So I'm going to give it just a touch more on the crank. And timer, so we have that timer running. It's showing 2.94 and 25 amps. So that's great. We've got 25 amps on line 1 to neutral. So this is a completely imbalanced load. Nothing is on L2, and we have no PV input, no generator input, no grid input. So this is a pure test for load imbalance. So we're gonna let this run for a minimum of 20 minutes. And I'll catch back with everybody. If it can do the full 20 minutes like this, then we know that it's true to its word on its load imbalance test. Why is the line imbalance test so important? Well, a little side story. I have a friend, Bill. I helped him install a very small, modest battery backup system, just in case the power goes out at his home. But we found out that his whole kitchen is on one circuit. And so he's got to be very careful what he turns on, because he was having that inverter shut off pretty regularly, depending on what things he turned on. So having this line imbalance and knowing that we can handle 3,000 watts on one leg means we can actually turn on two heavy units, such as a microwave and a toaster, on one leg and not have this particular inverter shut off, which is, you know, practical situation that might occur in an off-grid cabin. 28 minutes. Still says 2.91 kilowatts. And over here it says 25 amps. So this has worked great on the load imbalance test. Let's crank this up and see how far we can push it before it shuts off. This is the load imbalance test. .30 amps on one leg, and there it goes, it shut off. Well, that was the load imbalance test, and it worked out great. We had 25 amps on leg 1, nothing on leg 2, and had a little bit of a surge, and we could see that it did handle 30 amps for a few seconds before shutting down. So exactly what the manual said it could do, it did. That's excellent. The fans are still running. I don't know if you can hear that in the background. But at this point, the load is off, the circuit breaker load is off. I'm gonna rewire a couple of things on the load bank and then set this up for the 240 volt test. So for these military ones, we have to change this plug up here for the 240 volt. You can see we can do the 120 at one phase, but we have to move it up to the high voltage side for 240 volts one phase. So all these wires are stiff. Now we're wired up for 240 volts, so we're going to try to bring this inverter up to 6 kilowatts total. That's 25 amps at 240 volts. So right now we have 13.64 on the 240 volts. And now we'll adjust the knob here on the auto transformer. One click more. There we go, 25 amps on the 240 volt side. But over here on the display is showing 3 kilowatts. But that's only on the 120 volt. A very nice 240.3 volts. And that's exactly what the voltage was reading with no load. So with full load, it's still reading the same voltage. And still at 25 amps. Oh, and let's start this. All right, let's take a look. 28 minutes. And still going. You can see from the battery it's over 6 kilowatts, but it's only showing one leg for the output. But it is 6 kilowatts out. You can see 25 amps. So it has done 25 amps for half an hour. Well, that is an excellent test. That's great. All done. The next test for this inverter is going to be the surge capacity. The manual states that it can handle 11,000 watts for 5 seconds or 12,000 watts for 3.5 seconds. I should note that all of these tests are going to be at 240 volts. So at this point we have 1.2 or so amps, and that is feeding just the fan. So the master switch is on, but all these switches are off. So 3, 6, 9, and 12, and then we can adjust 3 kilowatts with the auto transformer. And this is at 240 volts. Right here, we're going to switch on the 12 kilowatt, and I'm going to try to start this at the exact moment that I flip this up. So here we go, 3, 2, 1. Wow. So it actually did it. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. Wow. That worked better than I thought. I was afraid that the inverter was just going to click off immediately when we threw on the 12 kilowatt load. I just turned the 12 kilowatts off. I will go back and check the camera, but I think that was 4 seconds or so, which is impressive. I like when it actually lives up to its manual specifications. So that's really great. I'm going to try pressing the start button at the same time as turning on the 9 kilowatt load. 3, 2, 1. All right. Well, we loaded this up to 9,000 watts and it lasted about 5 seconds. There must be some kind of time delay in there. It's not a thermal management. For anybody who's been following my channel for a while, you know that I can blow up an inverter with this 12-inch sliding compound miter saw. So it's one of my favorite tests to use. At one point I tested the inrush and I got 67 amps off this, but it's a 15 amp motor. Now it can draw less than 15 amps, but if you're really powering through something like this giant thick piece of oak, it can draw the full 15 amps. So we'll put the meter on it and we'll try it. Now, in addition to this, we're also going to have some heaters and the shop vac going with a big giant chunk of oak that we're going to be plowing through. We have this shop vac. It's 11 amps. And then these are 2 space heaters. These are 1,500 watts each. And I hooked up a couple of outlets on the 2 legs. So one leg has one heater and the shop vac, and the second leg is going to have the other heater and the saw. We'll start kicking these things on. So it's showing 1.5 kilowatts and then 1.52 kilowatts on the other leg. Let's kick this on. So 2.75 kilowatts on that one leg. There we go. Let's do it again. Well, aside from the little bit of scary portion where the oak jumped up into the blade, it did cut all the way through the oak, and the inverter did not shut down. So it worked. I'm gonna do this again, and I'm gonna bring the camera in so we can watch the amp meter. Now remember, we've got 2.6 kilowatts on one leg with the shop vac. I'm not sure exactly what we're getting when I'm pushing down on this, and that's a good note, is I'm not gently doing this like you're supposed to. I'm pulling down a bit hard, aggressively on the blade to really try to max out that motor. So right now each leg has 12.8 amps on it, and each leg can handle 25 amps, which we saw earlier. So let's look at what the amps are with the shop vac on. Okay, so 23.4. So this first leg has a heater and a shop vac, and it about maxes out at 23.4 amps. So we know that's going to be on that leg, and then over here we'll watch this other leg. I would say that's a success. That inverter ran 2 heaters, that's 3 kilowatts right there, plus the shop vac, plus this miter saw. I was able to cut through oak, make a nice good wedge there, and it did not shut off. The inverter did not overload. So I'd say it was a success. The inverter is living up to its specifications. I can't wait to go watch that footage and see what the amperage draw was. Well, that was fun. We just finished testing the EG4 6000XP inverter. Now, the most important thing for an inverter, in my opinion, is what can it do from battery to load, without the grid helping it, without PV helping it. I just want to see battery to load. And so that is what the specifications I tested to in this manual. We saw it could handle the surge for its rated 5 seconds. We could handle my miter saw, which is quite a heavy load, along with a bunch of other stuff going on. And it can handle the 6,000 watts continuous on 240 volts, and it can handle the 3,000 watts on one leg to neutral with nothing on the other leg. So total imbalance load. So that is what is printed in the manual for the specifications. That's what we tested to, and it passed. I'm pleased to see that. After all that testing, it confirms to me that this is the right choice for my situation, which is an off-grid cabin where I'm going to have a mini split heat pump for heating and cooling. I'm going to have lights, and I'm going to have some modest plug loads, but nothing major, and I think this is going to work just perfect in that situation. I hope the testing has helped you in your decision making, whether or not this is going to work out for your situation. Now you can parallel these if you want more. So if you want 12 kilowatts or 18 or whatever, you can parallel these together. I'm going to leave an affiliate link for this in the description below. If you use that, it does help out this channel and I appreciate it. Oh, and I will note that this also has 2 solar MPPT charge controllers built in that I did not test in this video. I will be using that in the off-grid cabin. So I'll be connecting 2 different strings of solar, and we'll see that testing once it gets hooked up. Again, thank you everybody so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share.